Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Sunday, October the 9th, and welcome to our commentary. We're going to talk a little bit today about a post that I have over at the American Thinker, a post about Che Guevara. You may know who I'm talking about. You may have seen his image on many T-shirts that college students and some other people wear, but he was captured and executed on this day in 1967. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what happened and the reaction back in 1967. Let me say hello to my friend, I am. How are you, my friend? Good to see you. But before I do, I want to point out that we had some posts last week over at the American Thinker, and there were two that I really think were quite relevant for the news of the week. The first one is what happened here in Texas last Friday, where we had a debate between Governor Abbott and the challenger, Beto ORourke. That particular debate didn't really add up to anything. It was frankly quite inconsequential. I would say neither side was brilliant, but because the governor's strategy is just to run out the clock since he's 8 to 10 points ahead. And I think this debate coming on a Friday night did exactly that, which is to run out the clock, which is what he did. I thought Beto O'Rourke was trying to land a punch and trying to hit the governor, but he really failed. He really couldn't get anything on the governor, in large part because the governor was very well prepared. I mean, one thing I've said throughout the year is that Governor Abbott was much better prepared for Beto O'Rourke than Senator Cruz 4 years ago. I think 4 years ago, there was a sense of not taking Beto O'Rourke very seriously. But the governor this year is taking him 100% seriously. And I think that showed up in the debate when the governor was very prepared with any accusation and went back at Beto several times. I mean, Beto O'Rourke has a very difficult job, really. Unseating a popular incumbent like Governor Abbott is a very difficult thing to do. Now, I know that Governor Abbott is not a very dynamic type of governor like, let's say, Rick Perry was. But he's still fairly popular, as you can see in the overall ratings. And I continue to say that he's going to win this thing anywhere from 7 to 10 points. And that's what the polling data is showing. So really not much of an opportunity for Beto O'Rourke at that debate to turn things around. And he didn't. And that's why I said that the strategy was to run out the clock, and the governor was successful in doing that. Another post that I wrote during the week is about OPEC cutting back production. I think this is the biggest economic story of the week. We are now facing a real shortage of oil. And unless we're willing to produce more here, unless we're willing to unleash our amazing production of oil, unless we're willing to unleash all the inventory that we have and tell the oilers, the oil men and women in Houston, Texas and Alaska, the fracking people in Pennsylvania, unless we're willing to unleash them, we're going to be facing some severe shortages of energy because nobody's helping us. We ran to the Middle East trying to get them to help us. They said no. Then the spectacle of going down to Venezuela, that was an insult to go down and ask Maduro for help. So we don't have anybody to go to, but yet we have all the energy in the world right here in the United States. I don't know who's giving President Biden advice, but my goodness, how foolish can he be? Foolish can he be holding back oil production at a time like this? I know they're using the climate change example and the environment and all of that. You can do both. You can have a clean environment and have fossil fuel production and use fossil fuel in a clean way. We've done it. We've done it before. But this administration, unfortunately, came under the control of many of these climate change alarmists. There's a difference between somebody like me who believes that there's climate change and we have to gradually move to other sources of energy, and someone who's an alarmist, who's just out there telling you that the world's going to end in 10 years, those kinds of alarmists. Well, those are the kinds of alarmists who are in the White House, and they're the ones who've put us in this situation. They're the ones who've put this country in this situation. And frankly, we need a change in the White House when it comes to energy, and we need it right now, today. There's no question about it. Drill, 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 like my listener said, drill, 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 drill. That's the only thing that we can do at this point of the game. And then on Saturday, I had a post over at the American Thinker about the great hypocrisy of these sanctuary cities like New York. New York City is complaining that they're not getting information. They're not getting forewarning, if you will, about these buses that are showing up. Well, neither is Texas. You know, we have over 2 million encounters on the border this year. And what is the government doing about it? Absolutely nothing. The federal government has pretty much resigned its responsibility with respect to the border. So I know that the mayor of New York City doesn't like it. The governor of New York City doesn't like it. Well, they should come down here and talk to the mayors of some of those cities on the border. They don't like it either. And they've got less resources in the city of New York to deal with it. So if the governor of New York doesn't like it, if the mayor of New York doesn't like it, they should call the White House and tell the White House to take responsibility for the border of the United States. Well, I have a post over at the American Thinker today, Sunday, talking about Che Guevara. Now, many of you know who I'm talking about. Sometimes you go to universities or you see these demonstrations and you'll see his image. Well, back in 1967, this week in 1967, he was captured and promptly executed by guerrillas or military elements of the Bolivian government working with the CIA. The story of Che Guevara is interesting. Of course, he came to power in Cuba with Fidel Castro, and a few years later, he was in Bolivia trying to start his own revolution. It didn't go very well, and the reason it didn't go well is because Cuba and Bolivia were completely different. And the natives that he was trying to convert in Bolivia did not respond to what he was trying to do. So in the last few days of his life, and we know this because he left a diary, Che Guevara was completely alone, didn't have any resources. He was a sick man. He had a very bad problem with asthma, and he was simply a very sick man. And, you know, if he had never been found by the Bolivian military, it's possible that he could have died in the Bolivian jungle because they were hungry. They didn't have any food. They didn't have the ability to move around in the jungles. They didn't have gasoline. They were running out of ammunition. So they were in deep trouble. So when he was captured by the Bolivian army, it's probably in a way, it was kind of a blessing in disguise for Che because he was going nowhere out there in the jungle. Now he was captured because a bunch of natives told the Bolivian military, he's in that house, go get him. Because they couldn't figure out Che Guevara either. I mean, you have these natives in Bolivia, and this guy shows up saying, I'm here to liberate you. No, they didn't buy into it any more than anybody else did. So eventually they caught him, they arrested him. And I think at first to negotiate some kind of an exit, you know, he said, look, I'm worth more dead than alive. That's exactly what he said. But the Bolivian army didn't want to mess with it. He was executed. And then he became the big hero that he is. But I can tell someone who came to the United States from Cuba, as someone who understands the Cuban story quite well, Che Guevara is nothing but a traitor and a murderer and someone who should not be praised by anybody. And all of those people who wear his T-shirts or the image on his T-shirts, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about this man who was not at all a believer in human rights or any kind of diversity, as they like to say these days. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy that he was captured. I'm happy that he was executed. And there goes Che Guevara. But it happened this day in 1967. That's a long time ago, but it happened on this day in 1967. Something else that happened on October the 9th, and that's John Lennon was born in Liverpool. John Lennon, of course, of the Beatles. You know, they obviously created the great sound of the Beatles. I thought Lennon and McCartney were great composers. But when the Beatles broke up and they took their solo directions, I never really liked them that much. In fact, it was hard for me to listen to a Beatles solo album, whether it was Lennon or McCartney. I just didn't think there were enough quality songs in their solo albums when you compare that with their product as a band back in the 1960s. So Lennon had a short solo career, then he went into exile, and then when he came back, when he came back with a brand new album, a pretty decent album called Double Fantasy. Starting Over and Woman were two songs from that album. He was, of course, killed in December of 1980. So God only knows what John Lennon would have done with a brand new career or a brand new decade to write music, but we lost him in December 1980. I think overall, they were much better as the Beatles. I thought their music was a lot better when they were talking about the Beatles. That's when I thought they were the best. When they were talking, when they were recording and singing as the Beatles. That's when I thought they were the best. When they went solo, they had some good songs, some good hits, but not too much beyond that. So John Lennon, born on this day in 1940, he died in 1980. So not a long life, but a significant life to say the least. Well, October is the month of postseason baseball. I hope you're enjoying that. They had this 2 or 3 days of wild card games, and now we're getting into the division series where I think Cleveland is going to play against the Yankees, and Seattle is going to play against Houston. And over in the National League, the Phillies are going to be facing the Braves, I believe. And whoever wins the game tonight between the Mets and San Diego is going to be playing against the Dodgers. So next week we'll have some good baseball stories to talk about. But I like to see Houston and the Yankees in the American League Final because that's going to be a rematch of that great series back in 2017. And I'm looking forward to that very much. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great remainder of your weekend, and we'll talk to you later. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. I should add very quickly here before I forget that we have a podcast available over on the audio side of the blog, a podcast that we did with Barry Castleman on Friday night. And we were talking about the midterms and specifically the U.S. Senate. So check that out. It's available in my inventory of shows over in the blog as well as Blog Talk Radio as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.